Well, now we go on to another environmental story, this one on dry land, and it involves the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition. Over the past 6 years, the number of commuters using bikes in the city has risen dramatically. They'd like nothing more than to see those numbers continue going up. And to that end, the influential advocacy group is lobbying hard for the city's transportation agency to pour a bigger chunk of its budget into bicycling improvements and develop a plan to make San Francisco on par with cities like Amsterdam, where commuting by bike is standard practice. Earlier today, I sat down with Leah, Shahum, head of the Bike Coalition, to hear her vision for the future of cycling in the city. Leah, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Well, let's talk about money and plans. The city is proposing to spend about $200 million to improve and expand biking in the city. And your group says, well, that's nice, but it's not really enough. In fact, it's not even close to enough. So if $200 million isn't enough, what would you like to see and how would the money be spent?
That's right. The city's own plans actually call for spending $500 million over the next 5 years to bring San Francisco up to what is really a top-tier bicycling city. When you look at places like Amsterdam and Copenhagen, where they're seeing 30 or 40% of trips made by bicycle, we know that's possible. And in fact, we've seen San Francisco itself increase biking by about 70% just in the last 5 years. So the city has set its sights for dramatically increasing even more the number of bike trips in the city and has actually set that money goal at $500 million over the next 5 years. We think that's a worthwhile goal.
You think it should be more, though? And how? Tell me, how should the money be spent? We're seeing more bike lanes. We're seeing other things that are making it easier and more visible for bikers to be safe on the roads. But how should that additional money be spent?
That's right. One of the great things about investing in bicycling is that it's remarkably cheap and pretty quick to make the difference. As much as we need to also invest in transit systems, we also know what a long lead time there is there to build, whether it be a bus rapid transit system or central subway or new roads. It's a very long time and a lot of money. We need to invest in those. But in the meantime, just in a matter of years, we can paint new bikeways, we can add new bike parking racks, we can really create education and encouragement systems that help literally tens of thousands of more people bicycle for pennies on the dollar of what these other major transportation projects cost. So really what we're calling for is the city to invest wisely and quickly in what we think will be a quick way to move more people around to their jobs, to school, everywhere. But
the pool of money, the pie, is like one size, more or less.
That's right. Right now,
so if you take money, what are you going to take money away from?
Yeah, good point. San Francisco is woefully underspending right now. It's less than 0.5% of the city's transportation capital budget. What we're calling for in spending that larger amount would still only be 8% of its overall capital budget.
That's a huge, that's 16-fold increase, right?
That's right. But moving what we think can be a very significant number of people, going from what is now estimated to be 3 or 4% of trips to up to 20% of trips by bicycle in the year 2020, which is the city's goal. So we know it is an increase, but still a very relatively modest number of the overall budget.
So what would we not spend money on then?
Great point. I think we've got to find new sources first and foremost. There's the opportunities coming up, such as the vehicle license fee. The state has given us the ability, and we hope to see that ability used soon to slightly raise the vehicle license fee here in the city and have that go towards transportation purposes. There's different bond measures being considered, and there's ways we can use the existing funds more creatively.
Let me ask you, if you're a driver, and I drive and I bike and I walk, but if you're a driver, you're seeing more parking meters go up, you're seeing the parking meter fines in some case and enforcement going up, you're seeing parking spaces being taken away for bike lanes. So I'm wondering, is part of the overall strategy to make it a little less comfortable to drive a car in the city?
Right. It's a good question. The city has set a goal of reducing private auto trips. It's part of the transportation agency's overall strategy to reduce auto trips the next 5 years by about 11%. Now, how will they do that? They'll grow transit trips. They'll grow bicycling, walking, taxi cab trips, and car share. So there is a method really to get to that. What I'd say is, particularly with things like parking, there's a goal to really think about parking management. How do we have more parking turnover so that people aren't necessarily sitting in one space all day, but turning over so that businesses are getting more customers?
And when you look at San Francisco and some of the things that we've done here in the city to make biking more popular, and it does seem to be working, biking. How do we compare? How do we stack up with other cities of a similar size?
Yeah. We're doing pretty well, but we're not at the top of the list. We have places like Portland that have higher bike ridership number than our own. We have places like Chicago that are literally building dozens of bikeways per year, and these are physically separated bikeways. I want to make that note because we really have evolved the thinking in
When you
terms
say
of bike.
physically, do you mean like with a raised road like they do, say, in Amsterdam and Copenhagen?
That's right. It could be an actual physical separation, or it may be places like, you may know, Market Street, where a section of that street has been, the bikeway has been painted green, and there are white small posts in between. And I want to note these are really, again, cheap and inexpensive and quick ways to make real separation between the motor vehicle traffic and the bicycle traffic. But this is what we're seeing cities across the country do. New York City, Chicago, Portland, Washington, D.C. is a great example.
I was just in D.C. and in Mexico City. Both have bike sharing now. Is that in the pipeline for San Francisco? And what's taking so long?
I'm happy to report it's coming. San Francisco and the South Bay, actually, all the way down to San Jose, will have bike share coming, we hope, this summer. It's been a bit delayed, and that's been frustrating, but the city is committed to starting a 1,000 bike share program. We're seeing a ton of interest from companies. A lot of people who really see this as a mobility need for their workforce.
And just a few seconds left, but what would you say is your dream? Like, what would you like to see, big picture, in 3-5 years in San Francisco?
We want to see every neighborhood in the city connected with great bikeways that are inviting, safe, comfortable for people ages 8 to 80, so that the thousands, tens of thousands of people who want to be bicycling in our city can be.
How many new miles of bike lanes would that require?
Yeah. Our goal, and I think we can get there, is 100 miles of new bikeways by the year 2020, and to reach that goal of 20% of trips of people biking by 2020.
All right. Well, Leah Shahum, thank you so much. Ride safely.
Thanks so much. See you out there in the bike lanes.
You will.